Hey, it's James Lynch. We got some interesting reports that came out in the last 24 hours, and this courtesy of MMA Hoj. I hope I'm saying that right. They have a pretty big YouTube channel here, 167,000 subscribers. They get a lot of guests. I know they've been doing a lot of good work on the news side of things, so if they're reporting this, I have to think it's pretty serious. I did some checking behind the scenes last night and did hear that this is kind of where the UFC is leaning right now. So let's start with the first one, and that is the Alex Pereira, Ciryl Gane title fight at UFC 328. So we don't know where UFC 328 is yet, as far as I know. So that would make sense. They need a main event for that card. And my understanding is this will be for the interim title. So Tom Aspinall is not vacating. He's not kicked out of the UFC like some people have suggested. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that they're just doing the interim title. And honestly, this isn't super surprising to me for the simple fact that the UFC needs big fights. They need to keep the schedule going. And I feel like there's been a lot of, not a lot of action going on as far as big fight announcements. And this is the Paramount era. They need to get things going, and they can't wait around for Tom Aspinall. I think an interim title is absolutely the correct call here. As much as I've defended Tom Aspinall on this channel, I understand the division has to get moving. I don't think there's a rush to have Tom Aspinall come back. Again, he fought at the end of October. You can do an interim title fight. So that's the first bit of news. The second bit of news is one that we've been hearing for a while, and I don't know what's been taking so long, honestly, but it's this Yuri and Carlos-Olberg fight. Now, I did check in with this last night. I believe this fight is signed. That's my understanding. So Yuri and Olberg main eventing Miami. Of course, we know Miami doesn't have a main event that's coming up here in April. This makes sense, and this also makes sense if you know that Pereira is moving up, right? That's why they're doing an interim title. So yeah, it's going to be an interim title. But what's interesting is they're both interim title fights. So Pereira will still be the light heavyweight champion, even though Yuri and Olberg are fighting each other, which is something that, I mean, my understanding was over the at least last year, they wouldn't let fighters keep their belt and move up. But I think in this case, it's one of those things where the UFC just needs to make a big fight. And I don't think Gane and Pereira would fight each other if it wasn't for a belt, or, you know, same thing with Yuri and Olberg. Although I think you could do Yuri and Olberg just as a one-off fight without any sort of title. So that sort of makes sense. And then the other thing they're saying here is Joshua Van and Tetsuro Taira. Again, Manel Kopp came out on social media earlier this week and mentioned that he is not fighting for the belt next. So this would also line up too. So it looks like 327 is going to be Yuri and Olberg and Joshua Van and Taira. And 328 is going to be Pereira and Gane. Let's go through the matchups. Again, not 100% official yet, but my understanding is these fights are, you know, very much close to happening. And again, the MMA Hoj site, very legit, not just some random account. This is an account with a lot of credibility. So we got to take it for face value as something that could be happening here pretty soon. So you know what the interesting thing here with Pereira and Gane is, because you think that Gane's going to be much bigger, being the heavyweight and all that. If you look at Pereira here, he's 6'4" with a 79-inch reach. Ciryl Gane will be taller. Actually, no, he's not taller. They have their exact same height. Reach advantage does go to Gane, but not by much, 81 to 79. So I'm really curious to see how this looks. Of course, we saw the video on social media the other day with Alex Pereira weighing around 243 pounds. So I don't think it's going to be, you know, much of a thing as far as, you know, the size and strength difference in this fight. Obviously, Gane's got to be, you know, stronger, you would think, because he's been more of a mainstay in the weight class. He's not cutting weight or anything like that. So Gane would have that advantage, but I'm curious to see if Pereira can do it. I don't remember the last time a, you know, UFC champion has gone up 3 weight classes and had success. We know that Pereira's had a lot of success at 205, so that certainly, you know, fits the narrative that he can do amazing things here. And at heavyweight, we'll see. But what's interesting is he's fighting a guy in Gane who's also a very good striker. Now, obviously, power-wise, Pereira has that edge here, but Gane, I would argue, maybe the more technical guy. Although, I mean, you could argue that Pereira's pretty damn technical too, with some of the shots that he's landed here. Quick tail of the tape between these two. 38 years old, like I mentioned, the height and reach. Gane is 35, so Gane's actually going to be 3 years younger here. And Pereira, of course, winning his belt back from Magomed Ankalaev, getting a finish in the very first round. Did lose to Ankalaev previous to that. We heard there were some injuries and possibly some sickness or something that maybe contributed to that. And obviously Pereira went out there and won the rematch. With Gane, we know the whole story, the eye poke, the unfortunate situation with the Tom Aspinall fight. Prior to that, he had the fight with Alexander Volkov, which a lot of people felt like he didn't win. I do want to bring that up here real quick. You know, Gane has had some performances that are a little bit questionable. If you go look at the Volkov fight as an example, majority of media members did think that Volkov won that fight. Just one media member scoring it for Ciryl Gane. But Gane looked good in his last fight. So again, it's kind of what more you did lately. Outside of that, his only other losses are Ngannou and John Jones. The John Jones performance, arguably the worst of his career. But outside that, he's performed quite well. Really good striking, like I said, and very good technically. So very interesting matchup. My pick in this one, It's tough, man, because, you know, I'm usually the guy that does pick the mainstay in the weight class, although I didn't do that with JDM and Islam. I'm kind of leaning Pereira here only because I think Pereira has achieved a little bit more. The only concern, obviously, is that, you know, he is, you know, this is the third weight class he's competing in. But I do think that Pereira, you know, over 5 rounds can land a good shot and possibly hurt Gane. I believe Tuivasa might have hit Gane and put him in some, I don't think he dropped him, but he definitely connected on Gane. And I remember thinking like, okay, maybe someone can get on the inside, but yeah, it's hard to bet against Pereira at this point. So my early pick, if this fight again does end up coming to fruition, would be Pereira on this one. Now let's go to the Yuri and Olberg fight. This one's a little bit more clear cut for me. We know the story of the last fight with Yuri, maybe one of the best comeback wins in UFC history. He was 100% going to lose the decision against Khalil Rountree if that fight had gone the full 3 rounds. Khalil Rountree clearly won two rounds in that fight. 3rd round, he gasses. Yuri comes out, takes advantage, and gets an amazing finish here on Khalil Rountree in the 3rd round. So Khalil Rountree ends up, losing that fight. And Yuri Prochazka now back-to-back wins. His only losses are to Pereira. And I have this theory with Yuri that, like, I think in order to knock him out, you got to be some insane knockout artist. And I don't think Olberg's that guy. He does have knockout power. We did see him knock out Dominic Reyes in his last fight. But we have a couple fights here like Jan Blachowicz, Volkan Ozdemir, fights that he wasn't able to finish the opponent. So I wouldn't put Olberg's power on the same level as Pereira. And for that reason, and just the fact that Yuri's just an absolute zombie to take out, I'm going Yuri Prochazka in this fight. I think he takes this fight. I think if you look at Olberg's win streak, it's a little bit deceiving here in the sense of, like, the opposition hasn't been great. Even going back to Fabio Cherant, like, look at these fights, not great opposition. The Jan Blachowicz fight, people felt like that was the one that maybe could have gone Jan's way. And look, he finished Dominic Reyes, I'll give him that. But Dominic Reyes has been knocked out, I think, 4 or 5 times in his career, 4 times. So, I mean, the blueprint was there to beat Dominic Reyes. But I think for Yuri, you got to take him just because I think there's one guy that can finish him, and that's Alex Pereira. I don't think Olberg's in that same category. I think Yuri's going to get it done. Not to mention he's going to be a dad. Maybe there's like a dad strength thing here from Yuri. Of course, I'm half kidding, but yeah, I just think I think Yuri's just better in all aspects. I think he's a much better. I think there's like a tier of light heavyweights, and I think Yuri's in that sort of elite tier. And I don't know if Olberg is. Now, if Olberg goes out there and finishes Yuri and gets it done, 100% I'm on board. As weird as this sounds, I'm still not totally sold on Olberg. Am I wrong here, guys? Let me know in the comments, but I just don't think Olberg's anything special. And I think this win streak's been a little bit, like I said, a little bit deceiving in this one. So again, that fight is supposed to headline Miami. This is supposed to headline UFC 328. Quickly, I'll mention the Van-Tyra fight because I think it's inevitable that fight's going to happen. I like Van in that fight. Again, the thing you have to worry about with Van, I think the only thing you really worry about is he did have that knockout loss to Charles Johnson. So I think if he's fighting a guy that has some power like a Manel Kopp, that's where things would get interesting. But if you look at what Tyra's done, sorry, I should have had this ready to go. If you look at Tyra, a lot of he does have 6 wins by knockout. He's got more submission wins, and I just don't think Van's got that bad of a ground game there. I just think the fight stays standing. I think Van's the better striker. I think he probably does take this one, and he's a little bit younger here, not by much. Tyra is 26, Van's 24. I think Van's getting better every fight. Now, obviously, you can't take anything away from his last fight with Pantoja, but because it was an injury. But you got to give him credit for the Brandon Royval win, and that's if you want to do a little bit of MMA math. I know Tyra lost a close decision to Royval back in 2024, but Van beat him and also dropped him in that fight too. So I like Van in that fight. It could lean a little bit more towards a decision than a finish, but I do like Van in that fight too. So again, say it one more time. These are not 100% official. My understanding is the Prochazka and Olberg fight is the closest out of all of them. That's like a done deal. Of course, most people kind of figure that anyways. But again, I'm hearing some good things about Pereira and Gane actually happening for 328. And it makes sense, like I said one more time, that they do need big fights. Because think about it, they're going to have to stack the White House card too. They've got to put on some good main events. This would make sense to do some interim titles. The only thing I wonder is, like, how's the interim title going to work if Pereira wins a heavyweight and then you've got that below as well. So follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll talk to you guys soon and appreciate you watching.